welcome to the Lost Media Chronicles, a show of which goes over various lost movies, music, art, you name it. So, this is our Christmas special, so you might be wondering, exactly what are we going over this week? Well, if you can read the title down there, you probably already know. But you might be asking yourself, what exactly does this have to do with Christmas?
Why not do the Frosty the Snowman audio, or any of the multiple parts of the Ralph Bakshi Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that never surfaced even on bootlegs?
Well, if you've been a long-time follower of my show, you probably know that a lot of the time what I go over has to do with me and my personal interests. So, without further ado, here is the full original cast video recording of Jonathan Larson's Rent.
Rent is a popular Broadway musical, sometimes dubbed a rock opera, that debuted in 1996. Written by Jonathan Larson, it details the life events of several characters in the late 80s or early 90s as they struggle with the raging AIDS epidemic. The plot is a bit of a copy from an old Italian opera called La Bohème. The events take place over the course of a year, starting and ending on or near Christmas, which is why I associate this musical so strongly with this holiday. Themes surrounding the concepts of giving, family, and joy are all expressed throughout the musical, along with some motifs repeated by many of the characters. Speaking of the characters, they are the biggest strength of this musical. From the erotic, wild Mimi, to the cross-dressing Angel, to the sometimes downright neurotic yet still somehow likable Maureen, there's a slew of different characters and personalities to connect with this. And another big draw was the diversity of the cast. Rent had characters of many different races and sexual orientations, and while it did wow many audience members back in the day, it proved to be just as controversial with other audiences.
Rent's story is actually rooted a lot deeper than what you see on stage, and its production was allegedly really troubled.
Rent was conceived as early as 1988, when then 29-year-old Jonathan Larson teamed up with another fledgling composer named Billy Aronson. Aronson was actually the one that came up with the overall concept, bringing the story of La Bohème to the MTV generation in an attempt to change the face of Broadway musicals for better or for worse. Larson had grown a bit sour of the industry due to a rock opera he wrote called Superbia, which was supposed to be an adaptation of George Orwell's 1984, but the Orwell estate denied him access to the rights. After several attempts to get some version of this musical off the ground, with just a small handful of performances, the musical proved to be a bust. After that, he wrote his now second most famous musical called Click, Click, Boom out of frustration.
As you can see, Larson wasn't exactly the most enthusiastic man on the face of the earth at the time that he started working on this. However, he was also hanging around a lot of the people that are part of the LGBT community, so something about this started clicking with him, and he knew he was glued to the right project.
Several songs were written out of this collaboration. Many songs that would be featured in the final version of Rent were composed during this time, some even in early forms of what they would later become. Aronson and Larson had a slight falling out, and Aronson had other commitments he needed to tend to, so eventually he had to part ways with Larson on the project. He did later give Larson permission to use the concept of music though, and Larson started work on his own. Its earliest incarnation, performed in 1993, was met with confused glances over the complicated plot and concerns over the featured gay and bisexual characters. Unwilling to budge on the characters, Larson started working to simplify the plot.
And considering that the plot to Rent is already really convoluted and complicated on its own, hearing that it was somehow even more complicated, whew, that's pretty horrifying.
After finally getting a cast together, it's been said, but not confirmed, that many production issues came into play. Technical issues were abound, investors and executives tried again and again to eliminate the LGBT characters, Larson started getting protested against by members of the press who weren't approving of the concept, and many other things that were allegedly going on behind the stage. One thing I can find out for sure is that the actors got along great, including Idina Menzel, who is now legendary as the voice of Elsa from Frozen, and for her role in the Wizard of Oz musical Wicked. Many fans may be surprised that this is where she originated. However, the biggest compliments are always the ones given to Larson, who is said to have always kept a bright and positive attitude, no matter how tough things got. Rent was scheduled to make its off-Broadway premiere. Hype was building around it, and it was already starting to sell tickets, and the cast were starting to get really excited.
Sadly, the night before it was scheduled to make its off-Broadway premiere, Jonathan Larson passed away of an undiagnosed aneurysm.
The saddened cast canceled the off-Broadway premiere and did a private performance for Larson's family and friends. The performance led to many teary-eyed viewers and was rumored to be videotaped. This rumor has not been confirmed though, and the likelihood of its existence and the likelihood of anyone releasing something so private, if it does exist, are both extremely low. The musical naturally went on without Larson and made its official Broadway release on time. The close-knit cast still had a director on hand, but allegedly were all so dedicated to keeping the show going that they rarely needed much direction at all.
Let it sink in for 1 second that Jonathan Larson's impact on the cast was that strong.
People who viewed it wrote letters to Larson thanking him, some even completely unaware that he was dead. Some viewers that were considering suicide were driven out of it thanks to the musical, and many other viewers whose sexual orientation was kept in the closet were able to finally come out because this musical gave them nothing to be ashamed of. The impact is so strong that it has even been parodied by other musicals. The hardcore fans, often dubbed Rent heads, would watch the show multiple times a year, leading to Rent becoming the 9th longest running Broadway musical of all time.
Of course, this proves to be a problem for people like me, who never lived anywhere near New York City in order to catch it on Broadway, and also never was able to catch it on tour. And of course, as I stated earlier, this is very personally connected with me, and it's also connected with another Lost Media Chronicles episode, the 9/11 episode.
I'm not going to dwell on this too much, as I spent several minutes talking about this in that episode, but I suffer from severe OCD that causes me to obsess about morbid subject matter, and 9/11 is a big obsession of mine. I was 17 when I first watched Rent, in the form of the movie, that is.
I know, I watched the movie version before I saw the Broadway version, but please have some mercy on me, I was only 17 at the time.
I had just gone through an obsessive bout with 9/11 and couldn't get it off of my mind. I desperately tried to watch any movie or listen to any song I could find just to get my mind off of it. I wasn't diagnosed with OCD yet, so I wasn't aware that that's actually one of the worst things you possibly can do. I mean, try not thinking about pink elephants whenever I say don't think about pink elephants. It works the same way in your own head. But one particular movie stuck with me, and that movie was Rent.
Rent left me teary-eyed and actually inspired me to start a hobby that I continue to this day, writing my own musicals.
I picked up a notebook that was entirely blank and started writing. My first outing of a musical was terrible, and I no longer own the manuscript to it as I've thrown it away out of shame. It had characters that were overtly sexual, awful lyrics, lead male characters that were Mary Sue's to put it politely, and also a plot so complicated that it confused the few friends of mine that I had read it. But there's one element that stood with me, using music by other artists to drive the plot. Now I know that sounds really stupid, but it's what I do. My plots have since gotten much smarter and characters more fleshed out. I now focus more on doing musicals based off the music of a single artist, with bands such as The Smiths and Arcade Fire getting finished rough drafts.
So what does my personal experience really have to do with the lost media involving Rent?
Well, finding the entire musical is pretty easy. There's the 2005 movie, but it's missing 2 original cast members and several key songs. So there must be a recorded stage version, right? Yeah, but it's with the revival cast recorded in 2008, which is still a really well done rendition, but even watching the movie version, you can tell that the original performers were much, much better. And part of the hype surrounding the original run of Rent was the amazing talent of its original cast. and that's something that you really want to see when you read about it. Don't get me wrong, the revival cast is still pretty good, but the original cast is a tough crowd to beat from what I'm reading and from what I've heard. So what options do we have involving the original cast? Well, there's the 2 CD audio recording, but it's missing some minor bits, a lot of dialogue, and the most important part, the visuals, which are a fundamental part of any Broadway musical, since it's just as much of a visual experience as it is an auditory.
Okay, so maybe the professional recordings didn't make the cut, but what about bootlegs and the recordings done by audience members?
Well, most amazingly is the opening night on-Broadway performance captured on camcorder in 1996. It's astounding enough that someone A, got away with it, and B, shared it for all the world to see. But there's a problem with it, and that's that it was recorded with a camcorder. The music is muffled, the dialogue is hard to follow, and not all of the action is captured on camera. So is there anything else that we have? Well, there's the 10-year anniversary show, and it's really close to capturing the original experience with much better quality, but you still get the obligatory echo of the stadium that isn't captured well with the camera that was used, and some of the actors have been away from the show for years at that point. The worst part is that the audience is sometimes being much more audible than the performers. I know I'm being nitpicky, but trust me, there's a reason for it.
There are many people continuing to discover this musical, even 20 years after its premiere, and being able to see it in its full is almost essential for them to really grasp exactly how important this was.
The musical was so thunderously popular, you'd think there would be a multi-cam performance of the full cast that has good quality audio, and there have been several promo videos that have surfaced on YouTube that feature multi-cam with the original cast. I'm not sure if this was only done for specific songs, or if an entire performance was done with it, but I'm willing to bet you that in someone's vault is a complete multi-cam performance featuring the full original cast. If Into the Woods could get this back in the 80s, Rent more than likely got it in the late 90s or the 2000s.
Rent is one of those works that helped save my life, just like it helped save the lives of so many other people, and it also helped instill a lot of positive habits and energy that I continue to this day, and if it weren't for it, I would have never picked up the hobby of writing my own musicals.
Heck, even after I was kicked out of my band, one of the things that kept me from going into severe depression was me picking up my Arcade Fire musical and rewriting it from scratch. I've had friends that have read it and want me to do something with it besides just letting it rot on my computer's hard drive. And here's the thing, I want to experience Rent in its full because I want to feel, at least in the best way that I possibly can, what the people who saw the original run did. And from what I can tell, many other people want to feel the same way.
If you think about it, LGBT people are often really accepted into our society these days. But back in 1995, that wasn't the case. Things were a lot different, and LGBT people were forced to kind of form their own culture because they weren't accepted by mainstream society. Before Rent, LGBT people were often forced to have to form their own culture, and in today's day and age, that seems a little foreign to us because they're just so accepted into our world. What Rent helped do is it helped put them into the limelight, and more importantly, it showed them as positive, uplifting people. I know with the social justice movement, a lot of people would say, but the work wasn't made for non-LGBT people. But I actually happen to think that it was made even more for them than it was for anyone else because it helps erase that bigotry. Nowadays, it's not uncommon to hear about straight men displaying feminine qualities and straight women displaying masculine qualities, and the whole definition behind those words is getting progressively more and more blurred. I'm not going to say that Rent did this entirely on its own, as there were many other movements going on that helped instill this change. But with this type of significance, you'd really think that maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there is a high-quality video recording with the original cast, especially if they were given so much hype and critical acclaim to begin with. Guys, I know this has been a long episode, and I've had a lot of personal connections intertwined with it, but trust me, this is a big deal. You really don't know how great something is unless you can experience it to the utmost fullest. And I know that in order to really experience it to the fullest, you would have to be there in person, but time has passed way too much for us to actually be able to experience that for the first time or even again. The fact that this musical has inspired so many people to come together and unite as one is enough to make me want to see it in its fullest. And that is enough to keep the Christmas spirit going, because nothing screams Christmas more than unity. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll be sure to see you again next year in the future. And I'll finally do that video game themed episode I promised last time. See you later.
525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments, oh dear. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in colors.